Hello, in this tutorial we're going to take a look at trigger areas and how you can use them. I've added a few more things to the map, most importantly some trigger areas and 2 rooms. Let's take a look at what settings we have available for trigger areas. The ones you'll use most of the time are under Collide, Basic Callbacks and Interaction. Let's set up this area so that something happens when the player passes through it. In the CC Entities text field, we'll have to write player so that the area will know to use its callback when the player passes through it. Now name your function in the callback text field and copy it into CodeLite. For this I went with the name OpenDoor since that's what I plan to use it for. Occasionally the level editor might fail to register changes to text fields. If that happens and your function isn't called, try to use the save as in the editor. That usually fixes the issue. When looking at the function's declaration, we can see that it has 3 parameters. As parent is the name of the area that uses the callback. As child is the name of the entity that interacted with the area. AL state gives information about the interaction. If it is 1, then it means that the object has entered the area. If it is -1, then it means that the object has left the area. Additionally, since the function is Boolean, it has to return a value. If the return value is false, then the callback will be removed after it is executed once. If it is true, then it will be used multiple times. Let's set it to false. Now let's fill in some if statements with debug messages to demonstrate how the area works. And then let's load the map into dev mode. From the debug message, we can see when the callback is being called. Now let's use the function to actually make things happen in-game. First, let's copy the name of the door from the hallway. There are 2 main types of doors in Soma: slide doors and swing doors. They use different functions. Let's make the door open with a script using the swing door push open function. You can see what the parameters mean from the code completion. You need the name of the door and some parameters that decide the way the door will be opened. After that, we can make a music cue play by using the music play function. The parameters for this are a file name, volume, a boolean value that determines whether it will loop or not, and the priority enum. Another interesting thing we can do with trigger areas is to check if the player can see them at a given time. Select the area from inside the room and go into its basic callbacks tab. There we have the player look at callback text field and a few settings related to that. Let's name the function look at lamp and copy it to the clipboard. Before we go into CodeLite, let's also uncheck the auto remove and check center of screen checkboxes. Now let's copy the function into CodeLite. It has 2 parameters. As entity is the name of the entity being looked at. AL state has the value of 1 if the entity is being looked at and a value of -1 if the player stops looking at the entity. Let's add some if statements with debug messages. Now let's go into the editor and take a look at the room. Let's get the name of the sliding door. We'll make it open or close depending on whether the player is looking at the lamp using the slide door set closed function. Let's also turn the lamp on or off. We need to get the lamp's name from the editor to do this. We will use the lamp setLit function, which needs 3 parameters. The name of the lamp, the state of the lamp we're setting it to, and whether we are going to fade in or have an instant transition. I actually accidentally messed up the syntax on this line. This is how it should look like. Now let's go into dev mode. Once the player gets into the next room, we will no longer need to check if the lamp is being looked at. Let's use a trigger area to disable the area with a look at callback and close the door to lock the player inside. Once the player is inside, he will have to interact with an area to spawn an object, and then throw the object into a hole in the wall to open the door again. In the editor, I have already placed the object where it is supposed to spawn and set it to be inactive. Let's set up the area above it to be interactable. To do this, we have to name and copy a player interact callback in the basic callbacks tab. We also have some additional settings in this tab and the interaction tab. I also want to have a sound played at a specific location, so I created a trigger area there and named it spawn sound source. Let's copy the interact callback into CodeLight. This function only has one parameter, the name of the entity that's being interacted with. First, let's use the soundCreateAtEntity function to spawn the sound at that specific area. Then let's enable the entity that's supposed to be spawned. And finally, let's disable the interact area. This can also be done with a checkbox in the level editor. Now let's set up an area where the player can throw the spawn object so that the door will open. Now let's set up an area where the player can throw the spawned object so that the door will open. Let's copy the name of the spawned object and paste it into the area's CC entities text field, then let's name and copy the collide function. Let's disable the object with some added special effects using the prop set active and fade function. Let's also open the slide door and play another music cue. We will return false since we only want this to happen once. This should be it for scripting. Let's test all of this in dev mode. Using trigger areas, you can already set up more complex events or puzzles. However, there are still some vital features that you need to know in order to create quality custom content for Soma. Stay tuned for more HPL3 scripting tutorials.